Live from Washington, this is BBC News. Fulton County officials have released the mugshot of former President Donald Trump after his booking in Georgia.
And I'm Carl Nassman in Atlanta, where it was a brief but historic visit for the former president.
And the U.S. Defense Department says it is likely that Yevgeny Prigozhin was killed in a Russian plane crash. I'm Sumi Somaskanda. It's good to have you with us. We start with an eventful past few hours and the surrendering of Donald Trump to authorities in the U.S. state of Georgia. Let's recap how things unfolded this evening. We started with Mr. Trump making his way down the stairs of the plane. His supporters like to call Trump Force One. His motorcade then started the 14-mile journey to the Fulton County Jail. That's about 22 kilometers. Helicopters gave us the bird's eye view throughout the trip. Mr. Trump pulled up to the jail just after 7:30 p.m. local time. Inside, he was fingerprinted and he had his mugshot taken. He is the first former U.S. president to have that mugshot taken. That's been made public now, as we know. The president delivered remarks to the press before leaving Georgia. Here's what he had to say.
Very sad day for America. This should never happen. If you challenge an election, you should be able to challenge an election. I thought the election was a rigged election, a stolen election, and I should have every right to do that. As you know, you have many people that you've been watching over the years do the same thing, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Stacey Abrams or many others. When you have that great freedom to challenge, you have to be able to, otherwise you're going to have very dishonest elections. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong.
Also today, Donald Trump returned to X, formerly known as Twitter, for the first time since his ban on the social media site was lifted. So he posted his mugshot there, adding simply, quote, "Election interference, never surrender." And he posted a link to his website. All right, let's go to our reporter on the ground, Carl Nassman, who is in Fulton County in Atlanta for us. Carl, it's been quite a day. Tell us what your impressions were of what happened today.
Yeah, it's been quite the day, and we were down there at the Fulton County Jail as it all unfolded. It was a fairly brief trip for Donald Trump. All in all, from the time he entered to the time he left the jail, it was about 30 minutes, and that was apparently enough time to have his fingerprints taken, to enter some personal information, and then, as we know, to have that historic mugshot taken, becoming the first former president to have that kind of photo taken of him. And then he was back in his motorcade and off to the airport. As we often see now, this is the fourth criminal case that Donald Trump is facing. He turned the legal into the political. This was also a spectacle, arriving at 7:30 or so in the evening, which is prime time for most television networks here in the United States. On the side where we were surrounded by very high security, but on the other side of that jail, there were several, 40 or 50 protesters, pro-Trump and anti-Trump, all adding to that atmosphere down there on a very warm day here in Atlanta, Georgia. That mugshot also, of course, becoming part of the spectacle. We're already seeing that picture appearing all over the internet. Donald Trump himself posting it, even tweeting it, the first time he's tweeted since 2021, and it's being memed by his supporters. We've even seen Marjorie Taylor Greene, a representative from Georgia, photoshopping herself into a similar mugshot. So this was, of course, a very serious day, a day where Donald Trump was facing his fourth legal and criminal case, but it was also turned into a political day. Quite the spectacle here in Atlanta.
And Carl, can you take us through what will happen next with this case in Georgia?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to point out that there are still defendants in this case that have not surrendered, that have not gone through the process that Donald Trump did today. We believe that there's still 7 more of those 19 defendants that are listed in this indictment who have yet to turn themselves in. They have a deadline of tomorrow around noon local time to do so. Otherwise, they will face a forceful arrest. They will be brought into that jail against their will. So we'll be looking out for that tomorrow. In terms of the timeline of the actual case itself, there is another big media spectacle on the horizon, and that will be the arraignment. That's the event where Donald Trump makes his appearance at this very courthouse behind me here in Atlanta to hear formally the charges read out against him and to enter a plea which we of course expect to be not guilty. And just adding one more step to that spectacle here in Georgia, given that this is a Georgia state trial, there will be cameras allowed in the courtroom. Judge Scott McAfee has granted access to 4 different camera teams, so we expect that arraignment will be broadcast on television.
Carl, what impact do you think that will have, just quickly to follow up on that point you just made about a televised trial?
Well, this is obviously somebody, Donald Trump, who enjoys the spotlight, who enjoys being on television. He's made every opportunity that he could throughout this entire legal process to try to bring as much attention as he could, because he says he's innocent. He says that these cases are politically motivated. In fact, as we speak, he's currently on Newsmax. He's giving a live interview after he was here in Georgia facing those criminal charges. So we don't know exactly what kind of impact it will be. Obviously, they'll have many eyes on that arraignment, and we expect that there could be cameras allowed in the courtroom throughout the process as this unfolds in Georgia. So this is definitely one of the things that sets this case apart from the other 3, and we'll see that arraignment is scheduled to be in the week of September 5th, so just a couple of weeks from now.
Carl Nassman reporting from Fulton County for us there. Carl, thank you so much. Now let's take a deeper look at the 13 charges against Donald Trump. Violating the state's Racketeering Act by unlawfully conspiring through a pattern of fraudulent activity to change the outcome of the election. 3 counts of solicitation of violation of oath by public office, including one related to Trump's January 2021 phone call with Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, where he asks Mr. Raffensperger to unlawfully alter the certified returns for presidential electors. Also, conspiracy to impersonate a public officer with intent to mislead. Conspiracy to commit forgery in the first degree by making a false document which would have made Trump appear to be the winning candidate in Georgia. And making false statements and writings and filing false documents. The indictment alleges to persuade Georgia legislators to reject lawful votes cast by duly elected officials. So for the legal take, I spoke with 2 former federal prosecutors, Joe Moreno and Sarah Krisoff. Let's start with Joe, who said the case against Mr. Trump in Georgia, along with the other 3 criminal cases against him, could proceed at a snail's pace.
I think that.
And we have a lot more detail, analysis, background on that top story on our website, bbc.com. Please be sure to check that out. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Let's take a look now at some other stories making headlines. Italy seized a rescue ship operated by a German NGO, making the total number of impounded vessels rise to 3 this week. Charity ships like the one seen here have been assisting in efforts to bring migrants at sea to shore, often at Italian port cities. The temporary seizure of the boats comes as migrant arrivals to Italy continue to soar. The number of applications for U.S. unemployment benefits fell for a second week, reaching its lowest level in 3 weeks. Claims for benefits decreased by 10,000 to a seasonally adjusted 230,000. The trend suggests that the demand for workers in the U.S. remains healthy despite fears of economic slowdown and recession. Meanwhile, in the U.S., T-Mobile plans to lay off 5,000 people. That's about 7% of its workforce. The layoffs will impact people across the country, but not retail or customer service jobs. This is the latest in a series of layoffs at some major U.S. companies in the past year. You're watching BBC News. The U.S. Defense Department says that Wagner Group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin was likely killed in the plane crash near Moscow that killed 10 people, according to an initial assessment. However, the Pentagon press secretary, Brigadier General Patrick Ryder, declined to give any details about how the department made that assessment. While the U.S. intelligence community is still assessing what caused Wednesday's plane crash, the Pentagon said there aren't any indications that a surface-to-air missile took down the plane. British defense sources have told the BBC they believe Russia's FSB spy agency is most likely to have been responsible. Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, has denied any involvement. He told journalists, quote, "Everyone is aware who is involved." Crash investigators have been combing through the wreckage. Beyond the passenger list, there's still no official confirmation of who was on board. The apparent death of Mr. Prigozhin will have global implications. As well as fighting in Ukraine, his mercenary group has been active in parts of Africa. Earlier, the BBC spoke exclusively to Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Defense, Volodymyr Havrilov, on what his death means in the war. A group of major emerging economies known as BRICS will welcome 6 new countries into the bloc, the group announced at the last day of its summit on Thursday. BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are often seen as a counterweight to Western partnerships. The 6 new countries, Argentina, Egypt, Iran, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, are set to join the alliance in January. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi praised the expansion of the bloc.
But it won't be easy, because the facts are up against fear. Shaima Khalil, BBC News, Fukushima.
Before we go, let's just recap our main story at this hour. Donald Trump was booked at the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta, Georgia. He spent about 25 minutes inside having his fingerprints and this mugshot taken. It's the first mugshot that's been made public of a former U.S. president. And don't forget, for all the latest on the story, you can get more on our website. That's bbc.com. Thank you for watching.